Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over Live, a fantastic show for you this evening with President Obama unveiling a new position on same-sex marriage this week and the continuing battle over the budget in Congress. We'll get reaction from former Speaker of the House and presidential candidate Newt Gingrich in an exclusive interview. And later, Bishop Robert Morlino of Madison, Wisconsin will join us about a controversy in his diocese, a parish that wanted to fire its priests. And the bishop will tell us what he did. And finally, we'll discuss the moral case for capitalism with the president of the American Enterprise Institute, Arthur Brooks. He's written a new book on the subject called The Road to Freedom: How to Win the Fight for Free Enterprise. If you have a question, give us a ring, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. Internationally, the number's 205-271-2980, or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com or on Facebook. Much ahead. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Gay marriage was placed front and center on the national and world stage this week as President Barack Obama declared his unequivocal personal support for gay marriage on Wednesday. After refusing to take a clear stand for months, the president ended speculation about his evolving view on the issue in a White House-arranged interview with ABC News' Robin Roberts. The president stopped short of saying whether same-sex couples had a federal right to marriage, instead saying that the issue should be handled by the states. From the campaign trail in Oklahoma, presumptive Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney reaffirmed his long-standing support for traditional marriage. Around the globe, President Obama's statement is being hailed as an historic watershed moment by gay rights advocates and rejected by others. Germany's openly gay foreign minister declared in his best English, "It's okay to marry gay," although it's not in Germany. Australia's Prime Minister Julia Gillard said her position is not evolving and that she won't be following President Obama's lead in spite of pressure from her own Labour Party. From the Vatican, Archbishop Diarmuid Martin offered the Church's position.
I mean, the Church's teaching is very clear about, in the nature of sexuality, is this mutuality between a man and a woman. It doesn't mean that the rights of people in their lives can't be protected, but the institution of marriage for the Church is not a social construct which can be changed.
Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York said the president's comments were deeply saddening and that the bishops, quote, cannot be silent in the face of words or actions that would undermine the institution of marriage, the very cornerstone of our society, end quote. The president's same-sex marriage declaration came out one day after the state of North Carolina overwhelmingly rejected gay marriage. By a 61 to 39% margin, voters on Tuesday amended the state's constitution to define marriage as solely between one man and one woman. The law already existed in state statutes. The constitutional amendment further outlaws same-sex unions. Voters in Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, and Washington consider the matter on the November ballot. More about this in our next segment. And the issue of marriage rights was also on the mind of Queen Elizabeth II on Wednesday, as she laid out the government's legislative agenda at the state opening of Parliament. But to the chagrin of gay rights and equality advocates, she wasn't talking about them. Instead, the Queen proposed that the laws of succession be reformed to permit heirs to the British throne to marry Roman Catholics. Archbishop Vincent Nichols, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Westminster, welcomed the news, calling the centuries-old ban a point of unjust discrimination against Catholics. Catholic ascension to the throne would still be problematic, as the British monarch is also the head of the Church of England. And two advocacy groups are calling on Georgetown University to rescind its speaking invitation to HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius for graduation ceremonies next week. The Cardinal Newman Society, a watchdog group of Catholic colleges and universities, called the invite scandalous and outrageous. citing Sebelius's long-standing support of abortion rights and for leading the Obama administration's contraception mandate efforts. In a separate letter to University President John DeGioia, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty called Sebelius's mandate the height of religious intolerance. And they said Georgetown should not associate itself with this attack on religious liberty. The letter further noted the irony that Georgetown's 1789 founding in Washington, D.C. resulted only because of Maryland's religious intolerance against Catholics. 18th century Maryland law strictly prohibited Catholic education. For the second time in recent months, members of the Pontifical Academy for Life are calling for the resignation of the Academy's top leaders. This after scientists who oppose church teaching on issues like birth control and infertility were featured at an annual conference. Australian theologian Joseph Seifert, a member of the Pontifical Academy, has expressed his profound shock over the February conference sponsored by the Academy, which featured presentations from scientists who dispute the church teaching on infertility treatments. Seifert described the conference as a Planned Parenthood-like meeting and said it was the worst day in the history of the Pontifical Academy for Life. More recently, the Academy canceled a conference in March after scheduling scientists to discuss embryonic stem cell research. The proposed conference drew angry protest from members of the Academy. And The Daily Show host Jon Stewart is continuing to take heat for a picture he showed of a nativity ornament placed between the legs of a naked woman. Stewart suggested that this might help Christians respect women's reproductive rights. After weeks of protest from Bill Donahue and the Catholic League, Delta Airlines this week pulled its ads from Comedy Central. In a statement to CNN, a spokeswoman said, "Delta doesn't discriminate, nor do we condone discrimination in regard to age, race, nationality, sexual orientation, religion, or gender." Delta stopped short of saying its decision was in direct response to the offending episode. Donahue is seeking an apology from Stewart for offending the sensibility of Christians. When we return, the president supports gay marriage. What could be the political and cultural effect? Newt Gingrich joins us live. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My first guest served as Speaker of the House from 1995 to 1999. He was a candidate for president in the 2012 race, suspending his campaign recently and endorsing the presumptive nominee, Mitt Romney. Here to discuss the political news of the week, including the president's evolving position on same-sex marriage. I guess it's evolved now. Please welcome back to the program, Newt Gingrich, Mr. Speaker.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Let's start with before we go to the big announcement, President Obama's announcement. Your endorsement of Mitt Romney was widely reported as being tepid. If you were called by Mitt Romney this afternoon and he asked, "What should I do?" what would you advise him in regard to framing issues, which no one did better than you, and articulating these issues to appeal to a wider base?
First of all, I am totally committed to Mitt Romney.
Okay.
And I'm surprised that, I said I am for Mitt Romney. I'm going to campaign for Mitt Romney. Calista and I are both going to campaign for Mitt Romney. Every conservative should vote for Mitt Romney. Somehow that got translated. I didn't use the word endorse. So let me say here on your show, I endorse Mitt Romney. Any press report to the contrary is wrong. I enthusiastically endorse Mitt Romney. Any use of the word tepid is wrong. You come down to ultimately two choices. We just saw, and you're going to get to in a minute, to Barack Obama, who every day proves to every conservative in the country why they have to beat him. And Mitt Romney, who's worked very hard to say to conservatives that he will be a dramatically better president than Barack Obama. And I will tell you, just on Supreme Court justices alone, Mitt Romney will be dramatically better than Barack Obama.
I want to get into the big news of the week. Here is the president speaking to Robin Roberts of ABC News on May 9th in this arranged interview. Take a listen.
I was sensitive to the fact that for a lot of people, the word marriage was something that evokes very powerful traditions, religious beliefs, and so forth. For me personally, it is important for me to go ahead and affirm that I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
The president, in the course of explaining how this position evolved, mentioned his Christianity, the golden rule, and that we have to treat others as we wish to be treated. That was his justification. Does that wash with you, and should he have invoked religion as a part of this decision?
Well, first of all, the president just took flip-flopping off the table. Any attack on Romney for whatever Romney's past views are going to look silly in the context of what the president just did. Second, I think you have a whole group of people who are breaking with Christianity but would like to pretend they're not. Let me be upfront about this, since we're talking about marriage. I'm divorced, I am remarried. There are all sorts of people can attack me for lots of reasons and do. But it comes down to a simple thing. I believe that, like St. Paul, we are in a world of clear contradiction between people who are have in fact left Christianity, but would like to pretend they haven't, and would like to invent a pseudo-Christianity, a Christianity in which it means whatever they think it means this week so they feel good. The golden rule has nothing to do with violating the rules of the Christian community. And Paul's pretty clear in his letters. There is Christianity and there is non-Christianity. And he's very, very clear about this. And I think you have all sorts of folks who may have gone to Catholic school, or they may have grown up and gone to evangelical school. They may once have been in Bible school. They know the words, but they no longer know the music. And we're seeing examples of that, and I'll play a bite that may illustrate your point. I want to talk for a moment about the politics of this. Is this a winner for Republicans? Ed Gillespie, who's advising the Romney camp, says they are going to use this against the president. At the same time, Speaker Boehner is saying, we don't want to talk about this. We want to talk about jobs and the economy. We're not talking about the same-sex issue. What do you think? Well, first of all, if you go on a show like this, you're going to talk about it. And it's legitimate to talk about, and I've always been very comfortable. I endorsed the North Carolina referendum. I was delighted to see it pass. And I thought it was a little strange that the president picked the immediate shadow of the people of North Carolina, which is a state he has to carry.
Right.
The people of North Carolina repudiating his view. But I think his allies on the left gave him no choice. I think we underestimate how much gay activists now dominate and define the Democratic Party, and we underestimate how great the pressure was on the president. And you saw it with the Joe Biden dance, the Hillary Clinton dance. I mean, this thing has been moving steadily.
You think it was calculated? I mean, the Joe Biden mention on Sunday, and then the rollout. Now Biden's apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry, I jumped the gun, boss." Do I think that a billion-dollar campaign of totally calculating Chicago politicians happened to have the vice president, happened to make a mistake, setting the stage for the president? No, this is silly. It's like the president who a little bit resembled Jimmy Carter in explaining that his conversation with his daughters was a major part of his evolution. This is like Carter describing nuclear war with Amy. And you should remember in the presidential debate, people around the country sitting going, wait a second, let me get this straight. Your conversation with Amy affected your understanding of nuclear war? I think similarly, the parent ought to be explaining to the child the eternal rules, not reinterpreting and redefining to make this week's dinner conversation more comfortable. Let's talk for a moment about the states that are in play here and that the president may be risking. We're talking about places like North Carolina, Colorado, Ohio, Missouri, Iowa, Virginia. Why would he risk that? Why would he risk these swing states?
Because the gay activist movement inside the Democratic Party and the billionaire supporters of that movement are so intense and they are so fed up that they basically said to him, and I think they did, I think they got him to come out, frankly, to try to erase the effect of North Carolina. North Carolina was a big defeat for that movement. And all of a sudden put them back on their heels, and he stepped in at exactly the right moment to say, well, you know,
Yeah.
You know, and I thought it was interesting. The Washington Post said the president, I think it was a historic decision. I wonder if the president said, you know, I'm really for traditional marriage between a man and a woman, would the Post have said, president makes historic recommitment?
Interesting. I want to play a bite for you. This is your successor, Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House. She was asked whether or how she reconciled her support of gay marriage and her Catholic faith this afternoon. Here's what she said.
Many of the people that are opposed to gay marriage cite their religion as the reason why they're opposed. But you're a Catholic that supports gay marriage. Do you believe that religion and the idea that you can support gay marriage should be separated? And how do you grapple with the idea that you support gay marriage as a Catholic?
My religion compels me, and I love it for it, to be against discrimination of any kind in our country. And I consider this a form of discrimination. I think it's unconstitutional on top of that.
Mr. Speaker.
Look, let me be clear here. I'm a convert. I think she was born into the church. She has a much deeper understanding of the church than I do. I think the appropriate person to have that discussion is her bishop. And her bishop may want to meet with her and share with her the bishop's view of the church's doctrine. But I don't think it would be appropriate for me to suggest that. But I suspect if you were to ask her bishop whether or not he agrees with that particular interpretation, I would be shocked if he thought she had a clear understanding of the church's doctrine.
Clearly, all of these issues will come to play in this presidential election when you have Catholics who constitute the swing vote, making, and at the moment, I'm going to tell you where they are. There's a new Public Religion Research Institute poll out today. 68% of evangelicals are with Romney. 19% of evangelicals are with Obama. But when you look at the Catholic vote, 46% support President Obama, 39% support Mitt Romney. How do you convince those Catholics that they should be supporting someone other than the president? It seems the president has their loyalty.
No, but I think the war against the Catholic Church, as has been explained by the bishops, has actually eroded the president some. That's below where the president was in the last election. He's losing ground. I think today his decision on gay marriage will further cause him to lose some ground. But I also think there's something deeper that's going on here. What I was struck with when Callista and I did the movie 9 Days That Changed the World about John Paul II, John Paul's strength in part was to courageously state the truth no matter what the government was doing. And people ultimately forced to choose decided that in fact they were Catholic and Polish, they weren't communist and atheist. And you can see the tension of this conversation. I think what the bishops are trying to do this summer in setting aside several weeks to talk about religious liberty, I think the recent commercial I saw, which is very powerful, which combines the issue of life, the issue of marriage, the issue of religious liberty, in a way that you look at that and you think, wow. I mean, it's beginning to all come together into a core question of who are you and who are we as an American people. And I would simply suggest to you that the evangelical community has been actively politicized longer, but that the Catholic hierarchy, which has really tried hard to avoid this, has found itself pushed into a corner by a radical administration. And as a result, with the intensity of John Paul II and now the intensity of the current Pope, is really moving in a way that's very different. And I think it's not that I think that they want to have this fight. I think it's that it's clear, as Cardinal Dolan has said, that this administration is giving them no choice. Because if they're going to stand up and be Catholic, they're going to be in a fight with those who would literally make it illegal to be Catholic.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Representative Paul Ryan submitted a budget several weeks ago. The Bishops' Conference has sent, by my count, 3 letters complaining about this particular budget, the most recent of which was yesterday. In it, they contend that more than 2 million families will be pushed off of food stamps, and that is unjust, and that the cuts are coming out of care and services provided to the poor. What would you say in reaction to that?
Well, I would encourage Chairman Ryan to meet with them and to walk them through his explanations and his understanding. For example, on the food stamp issue, The current administration does not require you to report your assets. Okay, so they had a case of somebody in Michigan who won $1 million lottery, but was technically eligible for food stamps because the lottery was in a state over here and they were only counting income over here.
Over here,
So I'd want to look at what is Paul doing and how is he doing it. Part of it's also an argument over how you'd organize things. Let me give you an example. If you take the same number of education dollars and you put 65% of them into a Catholic school, it's a 1/3 cut in education. It, by the way, doubles the likelihood that the child will graduate. So is a less expensive Catholic education a cut in education from a public bureaucracy that's failing?
No.
Or is it an improvement? And I think Ryan favors the right of parents to choose. I describe it as Pell Grants for K through 12, because liberals love Pell Grants. They hate vouchers, but they love Pell Grants.
Love Pell Grants, okay.
So I always say, why don't we have Pell Grants for K through 12? In which case, in many cities, you would see double the admission to Catholic schools because they're so clearly superior to the local unionized bureaucracy.
Let's talk for a moment about Marco Rubio has wheeled out a new version, or he's working on a new version of the DREAM Act, which smells awfully to my nose like Newt Gingrich's proposal during the presidential debates that the GOP has to come up with an immigration reform agenda that is sensitive to the concerns of families, doesn't separate people who've been here for 25 years. Your thoughts on where this will go, and is this necessary at this moment?
Well, first of all, I think conservatism has to be applicable to the real world. And so you take conservative principles and you say, what are we going to do now? And I like where Marco Rubio is going, just as I liked where Congressman David Rivera is going, because they're trying to apply practical, common sense principles. They're not giving away the store. They're not starting with this idea, let's give amnesty to millions of people. So they're not where the Democrats are. They're not where Obama is. But they're also saying, here are some really practical problems. One of the pieces which David Rivera has in his bill, and I suspect Marco Rubio will have in his, is if you're a young person who came here, and you came here illegally because your parents brought you across, let's say you were 3 years old, should you be allowed to join the American military? And as a result of serving to defend America, should you be allowed to apply for citizenship? Now, if you were still back home in your original country, you could. If you're here, you can't. And so there's a place where there's a common ground you can create that says, for those people who want to be citizen badly enough to serve America, we're going to have an avenue that makes you legal. And I think we can find some common sense practical grounds.
Final question. You have left this presidential race. What's next for Newt Gingrich?
I think what we're doing here tonight, to be a citizen teacher, to clarify and advocate and communicate. I am going to campaign for Governor Romney. I'm going to campaign for House and Senate Republicans. I think this is the most important election in our lifetime. But in addition, I'm going to continue to work on new ideas and new approaches at Gingirch Productions. And we're going to have a whole series of ideas at gingirchproductions.com that people will be able to go and see.
Great. Newt Gingrich, thank you for being here, Mr. Speaker. We'll catch up with you soon. For more information, you can go to newt.org for positions, issues, and what's next for the Speaker. When we return, a bishop is making national headlines after confronting a controversy in his diocese. We'll ask him about Representative Paul Ryan's budget. He is Ryan's bishop. Bishop Robert Morlino joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My next guest made national headlines this week when he confronted a parish attempting to fire its priests. He's Bishop Robert Morlino of Madison, Wisconsin. He's also Congressman Paul Ryan's local bishop. As the Ryan budget passed the House and the Bishops' Conference condemned it as cutting essential services to the poor, I asked Bishop Morlino how he views Ryan's budget and much more when I spoke to him earlier. Here's my exclusive interview with Bishop Robert Morlino. I want to start with this situation in the diocese at St. Mary's Parish in your diocese. It got national headlines this week. Essentially, it's a group of conservative priests, I don't want to use the word conservative, Orthodox priests from Spain,
Yes.
who came in, and they've been working at this parish since 2010, and there is a sudden uproar from the parish. What are you dealing with there? And tell me what you thought when you first heard that there was conflict in the parish.
Well, I was somewhat surprised, honestly, because as I introduced the priests of the Society of Jesus Christ the Priest to the parish family, I made it a point that they were happy, holy, hardworking men. And things there had gone the way things often go in a parish when there is a change of pastors. There are some people always who don't like the change and get themselves enervated about it. But most of the people kind of get comfortable and move along. And I had no reason to think that it would be different in Platteville. And as a matter of fact, 60% of the people have gone along. But there is a 40% group that seems to have a great difficulty. And I understand, because there was so much misunderstanding and so much misinformation and so much of a catechetical void in the last 40, 50 years. I understand the problem.
Right. And they
but
were
at
reacting,
the same
Bishop.
time, we have to move forward.
Yeah, we should tell people they were upset because the priests who came in, they said there will be no more altar girls. They said, we'll take care of distributing the communion, so we don't need extraordinary ministers of the communion. You went in, you were called in and basically looked and said, there's nothing that these men are doing that violates church teaching in any way. And yet a majority of the parishioners withheld contributions, and now I guess they're closing the parish school, right?
Well, yes, they are. I wouldn't say that a majority of the people withheld contributions. I would say those who are able to contribute more withheld contributions. I think that 60% of the people are basically willing to go forward with the priests, and I'm really hoping and inviting that the others will come in and learn how to work with them and go along. That's really the issue.
Now,
because we cannot have a situation where parishioners are in effect driving the priest out of the parish. And I'm trying to reach out in all charity to those who are unhappy and say, please talk to the priests, please get to know them. In many cases, the priests were never given a chance. And it's in that spirit, Raymond, that I wrote to the people.
And in the letter, it's a 5-page letter, and in it you suggest that, look, this should be a moment of reflection, and if you continue to whip up and instigate hatred and rumor and innuendo in the diocese, there are canonical penalties. Now, some, indeed the media at large, when you made headlines this week, they're saying, look, another enforcer, another example of the church coming down and clapping down on the laity. You would say what?
I would say what Father Caffardi, the canonist at Duquesne University, said, that I thought I owed it to them in respect to say, this is the road that we could be going down. Let's not go down that road, please. I actually said in my letter that I was writing now in a spirit of healing and reconciliation to avoid canonical warnings and action in the future. I said that explicitly, that I wanted to avoid that. And how that could be interpreted as exactly the opposite is beyond me.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a real misunderstanding in the reportage there and the way they're sort of characterizing you, and that's good that you clarified. What we're really facing in this case, a parish council wanting to sort of take control of the parish. They essentially wanted to fire these priests. Have we reached a point in the church where perhaps we have to reanalyze and look again at the role of parish councils in the governing of a parish?
Well, you're right on target, Raymond. And the other consultative groups. The other consultative groups in the parish with the parish council are meant to be consultative. they do not somehow relieve the pastor of his responsibility to govern. And through the misunderstanding of the documents of Vatican II, there has come about a situation in many parishes where different groups are in fact governing, and the priest is, in that sense, their servant as they govern. The priest is meant to be a servant by governing. He's supposed to govern in a kind and a humble way as much as he can. But he is supposed to govern. And it cannot be that a majority in a parish council or any other group, it cannot be that that majority rules the parish. The pastor has to then listen to that, take it to heart, and then do what is best for his parish, for the diocese, and for the whole church. The pastor is supposed to bring to the parish a much larger vision than the people there might have. Sometimes people in a parish think that that exhausts the church, that the church really is no bigger than their parish.
Yeah. Bishop Morlino, go ahead. I want to broaden this just a little bit because I don't want to take too much of your time.
Sure.
The situation you're facing in Madison, it seems to me, is something we're seeing play out not only nationally but across the globe as Pope Benedict attempts to correct what you mentioned earlier as some of the misunderstandings of Vatican II and what Vatican II implied or demanded. The Pope this week, on May 5th, said to the bishops who gathered for an ad limina visit, you must reaffirm and ask Catholic universities and colleges to reaffirm their Catholic identity, their Catholicity. Why do you think he's making that plea now at this moment?
Well, because it's very clear that so many universities that call themselves Catholic are expressing dissent from the teachings of the Church, whether about abortion or whatever. Now, sometimes they do that in very direct ways, but when you're honoring people at a school who favor abortion, or you're honoring people who favor same-sex marriage, that is not only against Catholic teaching, but it's against the natural law. It's against the language of God's creation. It's against the ecology of human nature. And if we're willing to protect the ecology of the environment, we should be just as eager to protect the ecology of human nature, and marriage is built into that ecology.
Bishop, as a former Jesuit, tell me your thoughts on Georgetown, the preeminent Catholic university, inviting Kathleen Sebelius to speak at a commencement ceremony there. This was announced last week at a moment when the bishops' conference are at loggerheads with the administration, and Kathleen Sebelius particularly, over this HHS mandate, and she is a Roman Catholic. Your thoughts?
Yes, well, if I were the president of Georgetown University, and I don't think that would ever be part of God's plan, but if I were, I would never have moved in a direction like that myself. Because, again, we're teaching the people by what we do the opposite of what we say. And our Catholic identity cannot be effectively communicated in that way. We have to get involved and act in accord with what we teach. We have to be witnesses, as Pope Paul VI always used to say, witnesses and not just teachers. So the identity of a Catholic university requires of us that we teach the teaching of the Church lovingly. We propose, we don't impose. We teach it lovingly, but in a very consistent and clear way. It's very important that Catholic schools do that. And I'm afraid too many of them have strayed from that direction. And I think our Holy Father wanted to tell us all as American bishops that we should focus on that particular concern in the Church, because he also said the formation of young people in that ad limina address. The
Right.
formation of young people is the top internal priority of the church in the United States, and I embrace that wholeheartedly.
I wonder, Bishop Morlino, your thoughts on what we're hearing from, again, another Catholic. The Vice President Joe Biden this week opened really the floodgates on Sunday about this whole issue of gay marriage. He came out in support of it. Then the president came out. The president even invoked Jesus. Your thoughts on what that means, and isn't that telegraphing an inconsistent message, having a Roman Catholic advertising himself as such, yet teaching something that's opposed to the church and supporting something opposed to the church teaching?
Well, at the face of it, it looks it looks to be a very saddening thing about Vice President Biden that he would do that. Of course, I don't have the opportunity ever to speak with Vice President Biden. I don't know exactly what he's thinking. So before I would speak too strongly about him personally, I would need to know a little bit more about what he's thinking. So in that sense, I would withhold comment. But in terms of what he has objectively done as a Catholic, he seems again to be entering the turf of Catholic theology. He seems to be giving a message quite opposite to the Church's teaching authority, to the Church's magisterium, and it would seem that such approaches cannot go on forever. But there are others who have the responsibility to listen to him carefully, to care for his soul and for his eternal good. And final judgments about those matters really need to be left to them.
You are the bishop of Representative Paul Ryan, who was on this show a few weeks ago and has been at the very center of so much discussion, in that he has put forward a budget that the Bishops' Conference continually has criticized. In fact, as recently as May 8th, Bishop Blair wrote a letter suggesting that this budget would disproportionately cut essential services to poor people, and that somehow it's unjust. As Paul Ryan's bishop, you would say what? He claims this is a prudential judgment, best left to the laity.
Well, Paul Ryan does stay in touch with me about such things. I consider him a fine Catholic gentleman. And I would just say that he knows what the lay mission in the church is. He understands it. And he understands that there is room for prudential judgments. And I trust him as a leader, a lay leader in doing the lay mission. I trust him to make his own judgments in a very sound way. And I don't think that he really needs any particular affirmation from me. He is a very responsible lay Catholic who understands lay mission and who makes his judgment very much in accord with all the teachings of the Church. And he knows how to do that. That's what I would say.
Phil Lawler, the writer, suggested this week that the bishops are perhaps overwhelming or taxing their moral voice by speaking on too wide a variety of issues. He even suggested that they may be harming their campaign for religious liberty and religious freedom. And he cites the USCCB speaking out on the federal budget, on the Arizona immigration law, Southern Sudan, landmines, budget cuts, invasion of Iran. Do you think that perhaps the bishops risk their moral voice by speaking so broadly on so many issues?
Well, I think that Phil Lawler's judgment is not unreasonable, let me say that. In fact, we have to be able to multitask because all of these issues are crying out. It's not as though really that the bishops or the church are looking to raise issues to the public eye in most of these cases. What's happening is these issues are being thrown at us, and it would be irresponsible for us not to respond. So I think that what we're doing is trying to fulfill our responsibility to respond what our culture and our society and our legislators put on our table. But I think with all of that, we can still insist that since freedom of religion and freedom of conscience are so basic, that certainly they deserve top priority, and I think they will get top priority. What might actually happen, how this might work from a point of view of sociology or political science, how this might work, I of course can't be sure. But I'm hoping that it will work out for the best, and I'm hoping that the Holy Spirit will really be with us, and I trust that the Holy Spirit will be with us, so that our concern about religious liberty, religious freedom, freedom of conscience will not be somehow put on any back burner.
Thanks to Bishop Robert Morlino for being with us this evening. My next guest is the author of 10 books and many articles on topics ranging from the economics of the arts to applied mathematics. He's currently the president of the American Enterprise Institute here in Washington and the author of the new book, The Road to Freedom: How to Win the Fight for Free Enterprise. Here to explain why a moral case for free enterprise needs to be made in order to avoid an economic catastrophe is Arthur Brooks. Arthur, welcome to the show.
Raymond, great to see you.
Now, why is a moral argument necessary, and what does a moral argument look like?
Well, a moral argument is basically saying, like our evangelical brothers say, what's written on our hearts, is to say why we think something is morally right as opposed to just materially right. Now, it's very easy for us in the world of public policy and economics to just make a material argument for the free enterprise system. Virtually everybody knows that it's the system that makes people richer than any other system in the history of the world. It's created the Industrial Revolution. It's brought about the middle class. All these wonderful material things. But in point of fact, those things are not enough to make a case to continue the free enterprise system. People are attacking the free enterprise system, saying it's not fair, saying that it does not help the poor enough. We have to have some sort of a rejoinder that talks about the moral case for free enterprise. If we can't make that case, we have to really reestablish whether or not it is the best system.
Well, as you know, I don't have to tell you, the argument floating in the pop culture is there's massive inequity. Even the bishops write about this.
Sure.
There are inequities in the economy, and someone has to help level things, balance them out. And some say the government is the instrument to do that. You would say what?
Well, you know, we hear the President of the United States talking constantly about this issue of inequity. He calls it fairness, of course.
Right.
He says the problem with the free enterprise system is that some people are so much richer than others. The rich need to pay their fair share. And I understand the necessity of people paying their taxes, of rendering unto Caesar. We have to have a functioning state, and rich people have more money. It's entirely appropriate that they pay more in taxes. The trouble is that that's not a legitimate definition of fairness, according to most Americans, most people, when they look at their hearts. About 89% in public opinion polls of Americans, when you ask them what is true fairness, they won't say it's spreading the wealth. They won't say that it's redistribution by government means. They'll say true fairness is rewarding merit and hard work and creating an opportunity society. So we do need some redistributive programs in government, but not for the sake of redistribution. That's not fair at all. What we need to do is to create an opportunity society, which is a profoundly moral thing to do.
Tell me, at 19, you had a bit of an enlightening when you realized the worth of earned success. Tell us about that.
Well, I was in college in 19. I was casting about. I was not
You're in Spain.
Well, I wasn't yet. I was actually in college not succeeding. In the college I was attending, and I mutually decided it would be better if we parted ways. So I went out and started work on my own. I became a professional musician. I decided to strike out and see where my fortunes would lead me. I wound up in the Barcelona Symphony. The truth of the matter is I went to Barcelona because I wanted to marry a girl in Barcelona. And I did marry her. And 20 years later, we have a house full of children, I'm happy to tell you. And when I was in Spain, I learned a lot of things. One of the things that I learned is that just the very fact that you can make your own success, you can earn your success, you have a much happier life. And that's a guiding philosophy that I've enjoyed ever since.
Let's talk for a moment about, we touched on it, the income inequities. Some say what you're really talking about is trickle-down economics. The rich get richer, and they might hand some trinkets down to the poor, but that's not good enough. Is that what you're advocating here?
I'm not. I'm advocating build-up economics from the bottom.
Explain that.
Well, basically, what we need to understand is this: if we're truly good Samaritans, we have to look for a system worldwide that will build up the poor, that will save the poor, not just by the thousands, but by the billions. So what's the only system that can do it? Let's look at the facts for a second. If you go back to 1970 and compare it to now, 80% of the world's worst poverty has been eradicated. Now, there's plenty of poverty in the world, don't get me wrong, but 80% of the number of people living on $1 a day or less has been eradicated. Why has that poverty gone away? Is it because of the United Nations, of U.S. foreign aid, or the International Monetary Fund? Of course not. The reason is because of globalization and international trade and entrepreneurship and free enterprise. It's truly a system for good Samaritans. Can we do better? Can we share more? Of course. But we need a system that will lift people up by the billions, and only free enterprise can do that.
You suggest in the book that this system, this free market system, builds a more virtuous society. Do you really believe that?
I really do. You know, the societies that I've been involved in my travels, either as a scholar or earlier as a musician, that are most avaricious, that are most envious, where it's all against all, are socialist societies. Those are the societies in which the government hands out all the benefits, and people are competing with each other, clawing each other's eyes out simply to get a piece of the limited government pie. In a free enterprise system with entrepreneurs, we have to help each other. Look, if I start a business, I need to have people who want to work for me, and I need those workers.
But Arthur, you're a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. Many of the viewers, and I've seen it in some of the emails. You say a virtuous society. We've seen an explosion in pornography, the destruction of the family, you name it. The trade with partners, governments that enslave people, including religiously motivated people like China, and I could go on. How is that virtuous?
It's true that there's so much terrible activity going on in the world, so much cultural degradation going on in the world. That's not the fault of free enterprise. In point of fact, we need a healthy culture to maintain a free enterprise system. Adam Smith was the father of modern economics. In 1776, he wrote a very famous book called The Wealth of Nations, the most famous book ever written in economics. That wasn't his first book. 17 years earlier, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he said we need a healthy moral culture if we're going to earn and deserve freedom. This is still true today. Look, if we're going to be able to have an economy that deserves freedom, that earns freedom, where people can earn their success, we have to be a moral, virtuous people. This is the reason that there will always be a need for the church to guide us and to teach us and to help us. The bishops can help us when they're not talking about economics, so they can get us ready to be free citizens participating in the free economy.
One of our email correspondents are writing in, and they said, didn't Pope Benedict say the government's role is to redistribute wealth? I'm going to read the quote. That's not exactly accurate. What he said was, I'm going to read two statements. One from 2009, the illusion that a policy of mere redistribution of existing wealth can definitively resolve the problem of poverty must be set aside. Wealth creation, therefore, becomes an inescapable duty. Then in 2011, he said, in order to be true peacemakers, we must educate ourselves in compassion, solidarity, working together. Skipping ahead, he says, seeking adequate mechanisms for the redistribution of wealth, the promotion of growth, cooperation for development, and conflict resolution. How do you reconcile that with your moral case for free enterprise?
There is a moral case for a social safety net. In a civilized, upwardly mobile society, it is absolutely appropriate for the public sector to take care of the poorest of the poor. That is different than a society in which we try to get rid of all of the risk, in which we try to bring people into some sort of economic equality, or worst of all, where we have a safety net that helps the middle class to the cost of the poor. One of the things that we do know in point of fact, that if we drive our economy over the edge, those who will be left holding the bag are the very poor themselves.
So, we often hear that there is a war on poverty. A war on the poor is what some are saying the Rhine budget is, for instance. You seem to be making the case here that the war on the poor is vis-a-vis these entitlement programs and that they enslave the poor. Explain that a bit.
Well, there's a really deep problem in our society that has been for a long time. to create dependency. When I was a kid growing up under very modest circumstances in Seattle, about a quarter of my neighbors were on welfare. Now, what was the problem with welfare? We all knew that it actually hurt those people. So that's one big problem. The second thing is when we're focusing on income redistribution per se to get more income equality, we lose focus on what truly matters, which is alleviating the worst suffering and creating more mobility. The happiest people are the people who say that they have earned their success. We need a society that's upwardly mobile. And when we're focusing on bringing the top down or just creating equality, we don't get more mobility. Greater mobility means focusing on the bottom 20% of the income distribution, saying what kind of education do they need? How do we bring them the tools of entrepreneurship? And how do we deal with cultural pathologies? We have to have the courage to deal with those things without being distracted by a false definition of fairness and some notion that income equality is a good per se.
Yeah, and that old biblical admonition that if a man does not work, neither should he eat. St. Paul?
Thessalonians?
You got it. Patricia from Pennsylvania, you're on the World Over Live. What's your question, Patricia?
It's really more of a comment. I agree a lot with what this gentleman has had to say, and I am one of the working poor, and I don't understand why so many of the working poor begrudge the wealthy. I admire them. They use their brains. They took the opportunities that this country gave to them, and they're to be commended. I don't begrudge them anything. I don't expect them to pay for me. It's wonderful when people are charitable, but you cannot sit there and expect people to do that for you. You have to help yourself. There is a time and a place for some of these government programs, but for the government to shame the rich and make them feel ashamed, shame on the government, because if it wasn't for the rich, the rest of us would be by the wayside.
Okay, thanks, Patricia.
I mean, Patricia, my prediction is you won't stay poor for long. The aspirational society in which people actually don't begrudge what people have earned, if they've truly, honestly earned it, is the hallmark of a successful person, somebody who's on the path to earning their success. I say this as an economist, having studied a lot of these patterns for many years. And it's true that the United States, the extraordinary thing about it is that we're not an envy-based society. We're an aspiration-based society. We must protect that. We need more people like Patricia.
But increasingly in the political discourse, we are an envy-based society. The politicians seek to divide. They're doing a good job of it. We see the Occupy protest. It seems to have scattered a bit. But the mindset is certainly entrenched. In many media operations, you see these stark lines. And it is the wealthy and one party and the poor and another party. Don't these parties have to come together a bit and make, you say, a moral argument? Which party is making the better moral argument now?
Well, the problem is that the left is making a false moral argument and the right is making no moral argument. That's the biggest problem. The conservatives are making only a material argument for the free enterprise system when they should be making an argument for A, earned success, B, true fairness based on merit, and C, the best way to lift up the poor. Once they start doing that, then we can have a discourse in which we bring people together. Americans are not inherently envious, but if we continue down this road, we know where it leads. We see the social democracies of Europe. They're imploding, they're hopeless, they're helpless, they have high unemployment and they have huge dependency on the state, and they're miserable.
Why is sacrifice such an important part of this free enterprise system and to the individuals involved in it?
Sacrifice is important because to get earned success, it has to be earned. It can't be given to you. And so I work a lot with entrepreneurs, people, real rags to riches types. And when you ask them, so I'll give you an example. I have a friend, his name is Charles Schwab. He has an investment firm.
Never heard of him.
And when I asked Charles Schwab about how his company evolved, he immediately started talking to me about the hard times. He went back to the day that he had to take a second mortgage on his house just to make payroll. Entrepreneurs always talk about the tough times because the earned part is the sweetest part of earned success. Now, my guess is if we went back in time, Chuck Schwab would have said, get me out of that part. But in retrospect, he had to learn his lessons and pass his tests. This is part of a life, a sacrificial life, in which we are all tested.
No, the Mother Angelica biography I wrote, some schools use it in entrepreneurial classes because here you have this nun who does just what you're talking about. $200 in the bank. She opens this network in her garage. It's a great, typical American success story.
It's a Horatio Alger story. It's incredible. I mean, your book really resonated with a lot of us for that reason.
No, she's fascinating for a number of reasons. Tell me, why do you think we haven't, and people haven't, we haven't embraced a moral argument for the economy, and it hasn't been made?
Well,
what's stopping it from being made?
What's stopping it from being made is the most obvious thing to say about free enterprise is that it makes us rich. And that argument sort of worked for a long time, but if you look at it, it's not really working anymore. It's not working anymore because we've gotten to the point where there's saturation of how people understand the free enterprise system, and there are very strong moral arguments coming from the bishops, but also from the President of the United States.
But isn't there a moral formation that needs to take place before you enter an economy? I mean, that's part of the Pope's critique, that people come in and they misunderstand the gifts that wealth can be and what to do with that wealth once it's earned.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, the cultural predicates of a free society are ironclad. I'm teaching my kids not about how to be good capitalists, but how to be good Christians. This is a very important thing. I mean, the reason I send my kids to good Catholic schools is not so they can grow up to be more productive individuals, but so they can grow up to be good men and women. That's the most important thing. If we forget that, then it's all for non-capitalism means nothing.
Very good. Arthur Brooks, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Raymond.
The book is The Road to Freedom, How to Win the Fight for Free Enterprise. It's available in bookstores everywhere and at all the usual online outlets. That's all the time we have until next week. You can find updates and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter and visiting my Facebook page. Both are linked at RaymondArroyo.com. Books from the Mother Angelica collection make a wonderful gift for Mom. And of D.I. Zing, the Laugh Out Loud Cultural Takedown I wrote with Laura Ingram is out in paperback. Just what Mom needs, a light laugh she can carry in the purse. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there, and my mother, Linda, Rebecca, and dear Mother Angelica. Love you all. See you next time. Bye now.